Welcome back. It is estimated that 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. Our next guest says understanding what happens to you legally when you get married might help more couples stay together for the long haul. Al Spiegel is a partner at McClario, Helm, Bertling, and Spiegel and joins us now. Hey, Al.
Hey, good morning, Molly. I really appreciate you timing out your engagement for a nice segue into this segment.
Yeah, trust me, I am listening very intently. So I want to get down to business here a little bit because some of this might sound a bit harsh, but I think it's really important to discuss and understand because I think that you're probably aware of some things that people just don't appreciate with what happens legally when you get married.
Absolutely, I am. And really, there's a couple things that happen at the time you get married. There are things that we assume happen that don't, and then there are things that we assume don't happen that do. So one example of something that we assume happens but doesn't is you assume that once you're married, your spouse is going to have access, if you're in a car accident or something like that, your spouse is going to be able to talk to your doctors, like they could 50 years ago, and that's really not the case anymore. We've got so many unique family situations that you really have to get papers done or your spouse isn't much different than a third party when they're talking to medical professionals about your care.
That's
fascinating. And then on the other side of things, and then on the other side of things is the idea of marital property. Wisconsin's a marital property state. So there are all these presumptions about who owns what once you're married that are way different than what you might want. For example, if you have a will, if you're in a second marriage situation and you have a will that gives everything to the kids from your first marriage, but you own a house with your new spouse, or you own a house on your own but you're married to your new spouse, there's going to be this presumption that your new spouse has an ownership interest in your property that you may or may not want to have in place in the event of your death. So there's a lot of different things you got to think through at the time you're getting married.
It seems like it'd be really important to get everything spelled out, whether it relates to your own health and medical decisions or your property, your assets, what you want to provide for with your children. So how do you suggest that people prepare themselves and their spouse for the new realities?
Yeah, well, the first thing you have to do, I have a lot of people who are really conscientious and come into my office and want to talk about things, but they haven't had the conversation between the two of them. So I get to be party to a lot of uncomfortable moments between new spouses talking about these things. The first thing you have to do is you got to talk things through with your new spouse and just talk about how do we want this to work? How do we want property to be managed if something happens, if one of us comes incapacitated, if one of us dies, all those kind of questions. Sometimes the answer is easy, sometimes it's not, but have those conversations and then go and talk to a lawyer so that we can prepare all the legal documents you need to make sure that's going to happen.
I always have thought that attorneys are part legal experts and then part psychologists, because I wonder your opinion about why couples aren't more comfortable or why they simply don't have those conversations before they meet with you.
Well, I really think there are two reasons. I think the first one is they don't want to have the conversation in the first place because there's this stigma that if we talk about something, kind of like Beetlejuice, if you talk about him, he's going to show up. But it's really not the case. I like to think of it like Murphy's Law, like the better I plan, the less likely it is that any of this stuff's going to happen. So I think that's the first problem. And then, dealing with a lawyer anytime is such an unusual situation for most people, and they don't have a lawyer that they consider to be their lawyer that they can talk to. And this is really a nice opportunity to make a connection with a lawyer, see if you're comfortable with that person now, so that if something happens, you're going to be comfortable into the future.
I like that. What should couples be doing then after marriage to prepare for life together?
Sure. Well, after marriage, hoping that we've had these conversations before, or even if we haven't, that we're going to have them soon, you got to get in and get a couple of things done. The first thing is you have to go and talk to your human resources department at your company, make sure that all your life insurance policies and all the benefits that you might have through work recognize the fact that you now have a spouse. And like I said before, we have to figure out whether that means everything goes to the spouse or if it's divided between the spouse and some kids or what's going to happen. And then similarly, we got to get into a lawyer's office to get at least a healthcare power of attorney and a financial power of attorney and probably a will or a trust to make sure we're going to have all of your bases covered to get a complete estate plan done.
We ran out of time, but really quick, Al, first of all, what kind of circumstances complicate legal relationships in marriages?
Well, the first circumstance is if you're a second marriage or a second relationship or someone's coming in with some kids that we have to think about it. And then the second one that's a big one is when there's some kind of an inheritance issue. Someone has received an inheritance or someone expects to receive an inheritance, and there's expectations between the two of you about how that's going to be handled.
And
so those are things that are really flags that... Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, last, really quick, your advice to newlyweds.
But my advice to newlyweds about everything is talk. Talk a lot. Talk about all the things that make you uncomfortable, because what you're going to find is walking through those situations with each other is only going to make you closer and more comfortable with each other.
See? You're part psychologist, too. You just proved it. Thanks a lot, Al. We appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Nice talking to you, and congratulations, Molly.
Thank you. Nice talking to you too, Al. Okay, so if you are traveling, you should download a free guide. It's called 5 Mistakes to Avoid After a Crash. Important information. All you have to do is go to mcclario.com. You can also visit that same website to schedule a free consult.